Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the AME Food Testing Show. Today's topic, environmental risk concerns, the dangers of pallets, with Dr. Karl Kolb, Chief Science Officer of the High Sierra Group. He's been a consistent guest on the program. Dr. Kolb is the Chief Science Officer of the High Sierra Group, which provides the nation's largest purveyor of food safety products and services. I'd like to now welcome Dr. Karl Kolb. Dr. Kolb?
Andy, good to be back. Nice to talk to you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Would you like to add anything to your brief but illustrious introduction?
Well, Andy, you probably don't have time, but go ahead.
Well, let's talk about today's topic. Environmental risk concerns, the dangers of pallets. What are pallets used for in food production?
Well, pallets have become a big concern to me in the last few months. And let me tell you why. And this is why I call this part 2, because it fills in some gaps that we've been looking for, some missing information in our environmental risk analysis and concerns and programs. And it's come down to pallets. I run into two gentlemen who belong to a company called Pallet Testing Services that have really impressed me. And I normally don't endorse any particular company or product, but these guys, I think, are onto something. In environmental testing, we're always concerned about tracing or tracking or trying to troubleshoot, find out where bacteria came from. Where did the Listeria come from in the drains? How come we found E. coli in the belts? Where did the pathogen, where did the E. coli come from that we found in the drain, on the floor, on the bottom of the boxes? And in talking to these two gentlemen, I find that the pallets, and it's been in front of us for a very long period of time, are one of the principal sources of bacteria transmission. And when you stop to think about it, we never do anything really serious about cleaning pallets. Testing pallets, certifying pallets, making sure that pallets are clean from plant to plant, from field to plant, and back again. I mean, we wash totes all day long and sanitize them, but we never take care of the pallets. And pallets are something that are either in use all the time, moving product back and forth, or they're stuck in the corner of a cooler, wet, damp, moldy, holding something that's been there for a month. And then we pull it out and we use it when we need it. And it occurred to me the other day that this is what's been transmitting a tremendous amount of bacteria between buildings, between plants, from agriculture to a truck that's may be used in 10 different ways between many different cities in the course of a week, in and out of a plant, because the bottom of that pallet is dirty. The bottom of that pallet's never clean. And it occurred to me this is the missing link in many of our environmental programs. And when these two guys talk about testing the bottom of the pallet, cleaning the bottom of the pallet with the special process that they use, and then testing it again and again and again for pesticide residue and several different types of bacteria, these guys are onto something, because it's not something we can easily do at our plants. And they've got a process and they've got a method. And in my testing, I find almost every known pathogen, high amounts of E. coli and coliforms on the bottom of these pallets. I would say a good 18 to 20% of pallets that come and go that I've tested, that just as recently as today I've looked at results and found that they're dirty. And we can't clean them well enough. So when you think about it, when you think about how does Listeria move, how does E. coli 157 move, it's on these pallets. We find people walking on the pallets. We find old pallets used that are soaked with oil or soaked with mold or just soaked. We find that they're broken. We find that they're just plain old. These are tremendous sources of transmission of bacteria. And so if we can stop that at the door, if we can require suppliers to have certified pallets, if we can require our suppliers to send us grade A pallets and not a grade B or a grade C or something that fails and barely holds the product, I think we're going to stop a significant amount of bacteria from plant to plant to plant to plant. It appears from what I've done.
Can I interrupt you at this point?
Yes, go ahead.
I've actually had those gentlemen on the AME Food Testing Show, and they've been interviewed and provided an excellent background. But I believe your detail that you're providing is much more of a concrete picture of the actual operation of a plant. Go ahead.
Well, hundreds of pallets come and go in a plant every day. We don't track these pallets. There's no serial number in these pallets. There's no lot number in these pallets. We don't know where these pallets have been. I'll bet you could take any pallet in the course of a month, and it could have found its way from Salinas to Yuma to Mexico to Washington, D.C., to Chelsea, New York, and back again, and pick up everything in between on these pallets and never have been cleaned. When I find 18 to 20% of the pallets in more than 5 different plants are contaminated, and we can't remove the contamination, I find that a very serious issue. People say, move to plastic pallets. I'm sorry, but plastic pallets don't get it. Once you have damage to plastic pallet, it can't be repaired, because that crease, that crevice, that break, that scrape, whatever it may be that has damaged the integrity of that pallet, can't be repaired. You have a permanent infusion of dirt and bacteria in those scrapes and cuts and breaks. And if
Dr. Kolb, can I interrupt you there?
Sure, go ahead.
You mentioned plastic pallets. You also mentioned the word dirty. Are you referring to Listeria and pathogenic transmission characteristics?
Yes, absolutely. When in the USDA model, dirt refers to anything that is not clean, that is not sanitized. So dirt could mean dirt. It could mean dirt pathogens, dirt bacteria. And when I say dirt, I mean dirt, and dirt pathogens, dirt bacteria. So when you could lodge that into a plastic pallet and you can't do anything with the pallet, and if the pallet breaks and we're trying to reuse it, you've wasted a tremendous amount of money on a piece of plastic that's of no good to anyone else and is environmentally unsound. I love wood pallets. Wood's a great preventer of a pathogen transmittal and if you keep it clean. But if you don't, if you can't correct it through a sanitation process, you've got something that is bad, something that is causing this transmission. Listeria loves moisture. It loves darkness. It loves dirt. It loves places to hide. When you talk about a bottom of a pallet, that's where you're going to find Listeria. You may not find E. coli 157 on the bottom. You will find it on top where people walk, because people walk into bathrooms. They walk outside. They walk where people spit. They walk where there's dirt, and then they walk on a pallet. The top, you can find Salmonella. You can find 157. On the bottom of that pallet, you can find Listeria monocytogen. It's time in and time out, because it's not looked for. It's hiding in plain sight, and we miss it every time. It's got to be part of an environmental testing program. I think it's got to be on a program with a third party that goes in and looks at it and evaluates it, cleans it, certifies it, and says, here's a good pallet. And then I think we need to care for that pallet in such a manner that it doesn't recontaminate itself. But we check through verification.
Dr. Kolb, can I interrupt you again?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Excuse me for interrupting, but I get these surges of inspiration, I think. I've been in so many plants, and I ask them, do you have an environmental screening or maintenance program or environmental program where you test occasionally? And they look blankly at me and say, Andy, I follow the old axiom, if I look for it, I'm going to find it, so therefore I don't look for it. Have you heard that in your experience?
Oh, I've heard that 1,000 times over. That's one of the reasons we don't do thorough finished product testing in this industry is we have a product in the produce industry that has no kill step. And the old axiom is if you don't want to find it, don't look for it. And that's wrong. We need to be looking for these things and not ignoring them. When we look for them, we've got to do something about it. And we found something in this with pallets. And I think pallets are the next big ticket item for environmental testing. I like what these pallet testing guys do. They come in and they really seriously look at this pallet. Is it clean or is it not? Well, let's clean it up. Let's test it for bacteria. Let's test it for pesticide residue. In fact, the organic community really needs to pay attention here, because they're very concerned about bringing pesticides onto their ranches, into their processing plants. Yet they fully will accept a pallet coming from anywhere they don't know of into their building, and then storing food on it. When that thing could be just laden with contamination from pesticide residue to who knows what. And I think
well,
the
Dr.
community needs to seriously take a look at this at pallets.
I'm going to interrupt you again. You raise another fascinating point. That is, as you look at pallets, let's look at the entire environment of the pallet. The floors, the pallets themselves, the trucks, the forklifts, all the other items of instrumentation that touch that pallet, and the pallet is a transmission vehicle or a vector of disease.
Oh, absolutely. Look at your feet. Look at when we do Listeria troubleshooting in a plant, because we know it's transmitted through feet from floors to from drains to wheels, we often look at forklift tires and say this is how it moves from one place to another. We overlook pallets altogether. Pallets are a great big old sponge. Now, wood is a great medium, because not only does it hold dirt very well because it has a rough surface, but it also cleans up very well and it resists very well. So, you've got a dual-edged sword here, but I would definitely go with a good pallet. I would definitely look at some of the places pallets move in your facility. I definitely look at saying that pallets require some special attention. There's a number of USDA studies that talk about people who store cabbage, who store carrots, and these sorts of things on pallets for 30, 60 days at a time in coolers, where they're finding Listeria. Oh my gosh, okay, we got rid of the product, we cleaned the building, we got rid of the Listeria, but did anybody think about the pallet? Not a soul. That pallet got tossed out on the pile with the other pallets and goes down the road to another facility and contaminates them, because Listeria is one of the most durable pathogens there is. It doesn't like to go away. It doesn't go away. It goes into cocoons and lives and survives until it's ready to come out again. And so I think that these guys are onto something. I think it's something that our programs really need to seriously consider, especially with the high rates of contamination and the fact that Listeria is growing at a rate of 20% a year. This is one of those transmission factors that has to be seriously looked at between plants.
Well, Dr. Kolb, you've kind of skirted around it, but I'd like to directly address the issue. How do pathogens prosper on pallets?
Well, it's very simple. I don't mean that in an arrogant fashion, but you've got wood, which is very porous, and all pathogens need is moisture and some air and a food source. And dirt is a food source. Organic matter is a food source. They can get in the cracks and crevices and live in there, be protected for the most part, and do very well, and grow and prosper and recontaminate. It's the kind of process we need that gets into those pores and pulls it out and cleans it out and tests to see if it is removed.
Well, then we assume that they grow on the pallet. So how do they transfer from a pallet, and how does the bacteria leave that and eventually end up on a food product?
Well, that comes down to understanding the characteristics of a pathogen. Basically, if you think about Listeria, it moves like a slime. In other words, it's kind of like having glue on your fingers. It gets on your fingers, gets on your clothes, moves to the counter, it gets sticky, it's all over the place. That's kind of what Listeria does. If you look at E. coli, E. coli is something a little bit like mud clots in a way. You can throw it and it lands, and you can clean it up, and it stays in a colony, and it has the characteristics of a rock pretty much. It's going to prosper where it lands. It's going to move if it's disturbed. If you look at salmonella is a lot like a ping pong ball. It's airborne. It can move around the plant. And when you talk about Listeria on pallets, it's going to slough off. It's going to move to the floor, from the floor to a tire, from the floor to a brush, to somebody's hands, to a splatter from a hose, and then next thing you know, it's on a conveyor, and then it's on your food.
Well, Dr. Kolb, how long can this bacteria survive on pallets?
Oh,
in other words, if you put it out in the sun,
years. It could go
if you put it out in the sun, will the UV rays kill it?
What's that again?
If the pallet is placed in direct sunlight, will the ultraviolet lights of the sun kill that bacteria?
Oh, absolutely. When I was in the Special Forces Airborne Ranger units, one of the ways in which we often cleaned our clothes after months and months in the swamps was to lay them out in the sun on rocks and let the sun just dry them, because it would eat up the bacteria and kill it. And the same thing holds for pallets. The same thing holds for anything you put in the light. It kills the darkness. It kills the bacteria.
Well, Dr. Kolb, that said, I'm going to go back to one very critical point you made, that it's important to have a third party come in and look at a food production facility's pallets. Can you review that again?
Yeah, you know what? I was talking to a gentleman today, an industry leader down here in Yuma. I'm in Yuma today, and about 52 degrees, and the sky is clear, and you hear the marine jets overhead. It's quite a great place. Talking to a gentleman today who's an industry leader, president of a very large company. And he said, you know, more and more, as these programs grow scientifically, the complications of regulations, the industry involvement, we're no longer looking at food safety as an adjunct program. It is everything we do. But it's way over our heads in terms of the science, in terms of the regulatory nature. We need consultants, educated, smart guys. We need third parties to tell us what's going right and wrong. We need people to certify things so we can demonstrate to our customers that things are clean, that things are working right. And this guy was right on. I mean, 10 years ago, just 5 years ago, you know, plants could run their own food safety program, but not today. It's not working like that. These big plants, they need help. They can't hire this kind of talent that's out there today, the scientists and the researchers, the regulatory folks, and make a profit. And that's where I think the consultant, the third parties, like these pallet testing guys, and I don't remember the name of the company. I think it's called Pallet Testing Services, and you may remember the names of these two gentlemen, but these are the kind of folks who dedicate their life in doing this thing correctly, and they need to receive our attention. They need to receive our support, because they're doing things we can't do. They're doing things we can't afford. They're doing things that we don't have time for.
Very good, Dr. Kolb. Can I just ask you a brief question? What are the concerns, and you mentioned it before, organic production and agricultural sites with the use of these presumed to be clean, but may prove to be otherwise? In other words, dirty pallets.
Well, I think what you're asking is, what's the impact of a dirty pallet in your production site? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Well, it's significant. If you take riding on an elevator and one person gets in with the flu, I guarantee you within 3 days that whole elevator's got the flu. You bring in a bunch of dirty pallets, you let them sit there for 2 or 3 days, or invite them into your plant to stock some food on them. Contamination is rampant. I haven't done any studies yet, but I intend to say that if you drop that pallet in a certain place on your cooler floor or in your plant, that within so many hours, that bacteria has begun to move out and search for other venues. And within a certain amount of time, I think it's going to be somewhere between 1 hour and 4 hours. You can expect that bacteria to slough off the pallet and find its way to the floor, find its way to forklift wheels, and find its way into your product via conveyor belts and other machinery.
Well, you've alluded to this again, and you keep on perking my interest. What is the testing difficulty for the average facility when it comes to pallets?
Well, they don't have it. I mean, yes, you can do environmental swabs on the bottom of your pallet, but are you able to do it thoroughly? Are you able to use the right swab? Do you know what to test for? How do you set this up as a sample for your lab? Can you do it in-house? These are big questions. We're talking about a surface that's wood, that's rough. You're talking about things that come and go, where you have very little control over where that pallet goes today, tomorrow, what comes in. Much like the big pallet companies that produce these, like CHEP, for instance, you have no control, but they do. And they can lot number them, and they can test them, and they can certify them through services like pallet testing. And You can require of your supplier, the party that's bringing you your goods, to give you a COA, a certificate of analysis that says every pallet that leaves here has been tested for cleanliness. It does not contain pathogens. It does not contain any pesticide residue. And you can relax as a QA and say, okay, I've got this certificate of analysis. These guys are doing their job, and I have no trouble accepting these pallets. But for yourself to test and yourself to clean, you don't have that kind of control. You don't have that kind of time. You don't have that kind of expertise. And so
Dr. Kolb, can I interrupt you?
What's that?
I have a question for you. I've been to many food production plants, and I see pallets come in, and yet they're left out in the yard with no covering, out in a mud lot, with the wind blowing, vermin running through it, animals, birds, insects, all using those pallets as harborage, a perfect harborage for creatures, and then that's brought back into the plant. How does a food production manager maintain this reseeded product from a validated vendor?
Well, let me turn the question around on you, because you're an inspector and you've been in a number of plants. You're an educated and experienced fellow in this business. When you're inspecting a plant and you see a stack of pallets like that, what does it tell you? How do you grade your facility when you come across that situation?
Well, thank you for turning it around on me, because I've often looked for that platform to express my personal opinion. And although it's not specifically on any line that I can recall in a food safety audit, I think it should be, my personal opinion. The following precautions. That pallets should be stored in a protected area, and if they're not, they should be shrink-wrapped, plastic wrapped, so that we prevent the intrusion of these vectors of birds, insects, dust and wind, mud, prior to entry into the facility. And that shrink wrap should be removed in the facility to maintain, as best as possible, a sterile field, or at least a clean area. Wouldn't you agree?
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And you would recommend, I'm sure, that they include these pallets in their sanitation program, that they go through some sort of inspection before they're used to make sure they're good grade A pallets, are in good condition. There's no contamination from lubricants or someone walking on them. Excuse me, I apologize. Some sort of pest control issue. And there's several areas a good inspector like yourself. I've heard good rumors about you. You've got a reputation to proceed yourself in the field, and I enjoy talking with a professional of your nature that at your caliber, that you'd suggest things like your sanitation program, your pest control program, even your maintenance program, to say, what can we do here to correct this situation? These pallets are like big sponges, and it's something we need to control. How do we do it? It's not cheap, it's not easy, but we need to find solutions. And here we come back to the question again of this industry is rising to the level of needing a lot of assistance from third parties, scientists, regulators, focus groups, others who provide goods and services that can help us, save us a lot of money, and thereby keep the industry safe. I mean, we're not only produce, we're talking meat, we're talking poultry, we're talking fish, we're talking about goods and services that move around this continent on pallets. That you look at the pallet today in Salinas, in our food plant, heck, that pallet could have been in China the day before. It could have been in South America the day before that. It could have held fish, and it could have held poultry. It could have had produce on it. It could have had chemicals on it. It could have been in a location that was cross-contaminated with some other contaminant, anthrax for that matter, and we don't know it. I mean, I think it could even be considered a security issue to a large degree.
Well, Dr. Kolb, you've raised some outstanding questions. In my mind, I'd like to ask you a hypothetical. I was conducting an audit, as you said, just recently, before the holidays, and I saw a pallet in an otherwise sterilely clean refrigerator. And I used my flashlight and highlighted to the plant manager who was doing a walkthrough with me, and I pointed my flashlight at a clump of mud that was attached to the bottom of a pallet. what would you suggest to that individual plant manager as to his next course of action after that flashlight was highlighted on that pallet inside his otherwise clean refrigerated room?
Well, most folks would identify it and ensure that it was secure so that it didn't further contaminate, put up some boundaries, yellow tape, whatever the case may be, remove the contamination, wash the area down, see if there's any concerns with the cross-contamination of the product. This is pretty much the standard industrial way, as you're aware, as you have taught, and have pointed out in inspections that the industry does with contamination in a facility, in an active production facility. And the cooler you're speaking of is an active production facility because they were storing things, and obviously the inspection was for a particular purpose.
Well, without revealing any names, they took immediate action, remedial action, and they incorporated into their marketing plan and safety plan complete objectives to eliminate the use of otherwise designated dirty pallets.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Kolb, your suggestions and advice for food production have been outstanding today. I'd like to allow you now time to summarize your remarks and to, again, as I do with all my guests, allow them to advertise their services, particularly you with your many clients throughout the United States.
Well, I really want to encourage people to look at pallets a lot closer. From a maintenance point of view and grading that pallet A, B, C, or D, is it broken? Is it contaminated permanently with paint or lubricants? And to only use A pallets, not B, C's, or failures. I want to encourage people to continue looking for contamination on pallets, put it in their environmental testing programs. I encourage people to look at it like the actual product itself, or at least it much like product packaging, if not for any other reason. I want to encourage people to think about how contamination can be spread very quickly, very easily, from plant to plant, from field to plant, around the world. I think you could fill in for a lot of questions we've had over the years about how did we get bacteria in here. So I want people to look and think about pallets. I want people to employ knowledgeable people, experts like Pallet Testing Services, to come in and advise them and give them a hand and teach them some things. It's not as simple as it appears to be. There's a science behind this. And as far as my company is concerned, I think we do a very good job. As I've said many times before, integrity and trust is everything. We work with people. We help people. We're not there to collect a nickel every time someone calls on the phone. We're not going to tell you what you want to hear necessarily, but we're going to tell you the truth. And for the most part, you're going to get a call back or your answer on the same day. That's who we are. That's how we built the nation's largest food safety and service business. So that's my 2 cents on the advertising, and I encourage people to give us a call and just chat with us if they like.
Well, Dr. Kolb, as always, I list your contact information, including your name and phone number, and email and website. I'd like to thank you for your participation again on a very timely and critical topic, and I believe as our industry develops and matures that we'll see more emphasis on pallets and their potential for disease contamination.
Much agreed. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, and have a good evening.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.